Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa usalli wa usallim ala Sayyid al-Awwaleen wal Akhirin. Nabiyyina Muhammadan wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa barak wa sallam. All praise are due to Allah, Lord of the worlds. Peace and blessings be constantly showered upon our beloved Prophet Muhammad, the master of the first and the last, and upon his family, his companions, and all those who call to his way and establish his sunnah to the day of judgment. As to what follows, my beloved brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Alhamdulillah, we thank Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for the gift of life and the opportunity to reflect upon his mercy with the coming of the last Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him. And we cannot thank Allah enough for the guidance, for the light in the time of darkness, and for the understanding of what actually is happening in the world around us. And that is something special with the last Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, that he did not come to his people alone. He did not come to the Arabs alone, but he came to all of humanity and the jinn. And the message of the last Quran is the divine connection. It's a divine communication with the creator of the heavens and the earth to the day of judgment. And so for all people of all nationalities, all time periods, this is the final communication from the creator of the heavens and the earth. And in the chaotic times that we are living in today, the information we are looking for is critical for us to understand not only what is to come, but what is happening now. Because the advent of digital technology has caused a lot of confusion, especially with the younger generation. Because there is cyberspace, a manufactured world that people are constantly looking at, and there's the reality on the ground. And in many cases, cyberspace is very much different than the world, and so it's very confusing for young people and sometimes frightening. And so we find today that there are a lot of people who are resorting to drugs. They are resorting to ways to escape the realities that they are facing. But we, as the holders of the last message, have to face the world. We have to face the reality, and this message gives us a connection not only with this world, but the transition to the hereafter. And that is a way of reassurance for the hearts of the believers. Also, we find today, because of the nature of the world that we're living in, that people are thinking in terms of apocalypse. And we mentioned this before, the concept of an apocalypse, a major disruption in the world that is on the minds of people, whether they believe in God or not. And you find that even in the movies and in cyberspace, many of the projections are dealing with what happens after the nuclear holocaust. It's the apocalypse. So they're trying to even give an image of how people will live after the destruction. But what is frightening is that that destruction is actually close to us. And we can see it being played out in the present confrontation with Ukraine and Russia, and with the nuclear capabilities that are there. And it's getting closer and closer. It's inching closer and closer to some kind of destruction, man-made destruction. The other issue, which is something we can't forget, it's like an elephant in the room, and that is climate catastrophe. That no matter what we think, no matter what our science is telling us, the climate has turned against us. Literally, the sun that is supposed to be a source of blessing to us is causing us destruction, droughts. I have the water, which is the source of life. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, وَجَعَلْنَا مِنَ الْمَاءِ كُلَّ شَيْءٍ حَيٍّ, that we have made from water every living thing. The majority of our body, most of our body, is made of water. Water, when you're in trouble, when you're sick, that is the best cure. Right in the beginning, the purification, increasing the strength of the cells that are in your body. But that same water can turn into destruction. And we see it being played out with the climate change affecting the heat in the world, the glaciers melting. Probably the most stark example of this is in Pakistan itself, which is still 1/3 underwater. And that is an international crisis, although it is being played out of the media. There is also a looming recession. The economies that were supposed to be so strong, the dollars and the pounds and the reals and the monies that we use, are in serious danger. And so all of these issues is causing a type of nervousness in people, apocalyptic thinking. And as we have discussed previously, the Christians, the Jews have concepts of what will happen. What is the final countdown? And Muslims, to a great extent, do not get these teachings. We basically learn how to pray and how to fast and how to make Salat al-Eid. But unless you're a student of knowledge, the general understanding of the last days, alamat as-sa'a, the signs of the coming of the hour, are not so well known. And so this course, this set of meetings, is intended to try to bring light on this and to actually bring out some of the points, using the most authentic sources that we have to give us an understanding from our own point of view what is actually about to happen. And so the final countdown, this is where we are at. And this countdown, this final hour that will come, the day of judgment, however you want to call it, it is a surety. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has told us in the Quran, Inna sa'a la'atiyatun la rayba fiha, walakinna akthar an-nas la yu'minun. Allah told us most surely the hour is coming. There is no doubt therein. But most people do not believe. So this is an interesting concept. This is something which is definite. They even say in the secular countries, the only thing that's sure is in life is death and taxes. So it's sure. But this day of judgment, this final coming about, it is a surety. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also tells us, the hour has drawn near and the moon has split. اقتربت الساعة وانشق القمر. So this is an incident that happened in the time of the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him. It is called the splitting of the moon, and we will look at that even more. But Allah says, the hour has drawn near. So it's close. There are some skeptics, even amongst the Muslims, that say, oh no, that's just a fairy tale. It's far away from us. But it is seriously close. And it is so close that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has told us the event ordained by Allah will come to pass, so do not hasten it. Ata amrullahi fala tastajilu subhanahu wa ta'ala amma yushrikun. Right? That Allah is saying, that the ata amrullah, that this event which is ordained will come to pass, so do not hasten it. And it's interesting because the way the Arabic is, and this is part of what is called balagha. And balagha is to study the imagery, the usage of the words. Arabic is a language, but this usage is a divine type of understanding, that if you can read Arabic, if you think through the mind of an Arabic-speaking person, this is going to do something to your head, right? Because it says, Ata amrullah. So that's the past tense. That's not the present tense. We have to translate it. The hour ordained will come to pass. But Allah said, Ata amrullah. It already came. Because for Allah, the past, the present, and the future are the same. But for us, we are in the present, and we're moving toward the future. And of course, the past is there. And in terms of the relationship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with time, Allah tells us in the 70th chapter, verse 6 and 7, verily they see it, meaning the torment, far off, but we see it quite near. إِنَّهُمْ يَرَوْنَهُ بَعِيدًا وَنَرَاهُ قَرِيبًا. So they see it as far away, but we see it close. So it is right on us. And this is something which is very important for people to understand about the message that is coming. And the Prophet ﷺ, in speaking to his companions, because they would ask him everything, and they'd ask him about when is the day of judgment, because the Quran is talking about this, when is it? And the Prophet ﷺ once said, what is left for you in comparison to the nations who came before you is like the time between Asr prayer and sunset. This is the end of the day, because remember, the Islamic date begins after Maghrib, right? That's when our calendar changes. So the whole day now has gone from Maghrib all the way to Fajr. That's the days. That's part of the day, right? And then from Fajr to Dhuhr, and then to Asr. Now that last little time after Asr, that's all that's left. It's like we studied when Ramadan comes, some people, they sleep, they make Fajr, if Allah has mercy on them, and they sleep. And they sleep all the way till Dhuhr. And if Allah has mercy, they get up and make Dhuhr. And then they go back to sleep. I lived in the Middle East, so I've experienced this. Then they sleep from Dhuhr till Asr. Then after Asr, they get up. Now they're fasting day. But they spend their time making their juice and their samosas and whatever. So that little time that's there between Asr and Maghrib, think about it. It's not much time. It's like a flash. Especially here in Canada, think about the time between Asr and Maghrib. For us, it's like a flash in the northern countries. Okay? So this is what he said. That's the imagery, right? It's imagery he's given you. And then he also gestured with his index and middle finger. Right? He said, I and the hour have been sent like this. Right? And he showed his fingers. Right? That's all that's left. Okay, so we're right on the time of the last day. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed, وَيَسْأَلُونَكَ النَّاسِ عَنِ السَّاعَةِ قُلْ إِنَّمَا عِلْمُهَا عِنْدَ اللَّهِ وَمَا يُدْرِيكَ لَعَلَّ السَّاعَةَ تَكُونُ قَرِيبًا. Allah said, people ask you concerning the hour. So this is how some of the verses come, that Allah is saying to the Prophet, they're asking you about this, right? So this is how the verse comes down. So it says, people ask you, O Muhammad, concerning the hour, say, the knowledge of it is with Allah. What do you know? It may be that the hour is near. Okay, it could be close. And these are some other ayahs if you want to have more references concerning it. But there's a very interesting tradition that it's, the Prophet ﷺ was in Medina, and he was sitting with his companions, and a man came into the masjid, and his hair was very black, and his clothes were sparklingly white. And he came into the mosque, and he went straight to the Prophet ﷺ. Now, there's a type of security that they had, right? So when this foreigner is coming in, the Prophet obviously gave a nod to Umar and them, okay, let him in. And so he comes right through the security and he put his knees to the Prophet's knees and looked him in his eyes. Now, that's really strange. And it's strange because his clothes are white, sparklingly white, because if you go from your house to the masjid, there's going to be dust on your clothes. But his clothes are extremely white. And he put his knees to the Prophet ﷺ and put his hand, and then he asked him, about what is Islam. Okay, he's asking him questions. What is Iman? What is faith? What is Ihsan? What is righteousness? And the Prophet's answering. And the man said, Sadaqt, you're correct. And that was strange too. Because how can the person say to the Prophet that you're correct? It's like he's your teacher. Okay? And then he asked him, Mata sa'a, when is the hour? Okay, this is our witness here. And the Prophet ﷺ said that the questioner knows more than the one being questioned. In other words, you know better than me. So he's the messenger of Allah receiving revelation from above 7 heavens, but yet he's saying, I don't know. And it turns out, this is the famous Hadith Jibreel, and it turns out that this was the angel Jibreel who was speaking to the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him. So the shahid here, the witness here is that we don't know. Nobody can actually say when it is. And there are some people who have made, there are some speculations that have been made. Some of the great scholars, Imam al-Tabari, great scholar, you might know his tafsir Tabari, in 500 AH, right? He, they were trying to make some sort of, guess, like an educated guess as to when the hour would actually come. And he speculated it's in a couple hundred years. He wasn't sure. But Imam Jalaluddin as-Suyuti, and he's a famous Egyptian scholar, 15th century, an amazing scholar. It's interesting, he said it's the beginning of the 15th century after the Hijrah. That's where we are now, right? Because 1400s, Suyuti thought it was, his projection was what we're in now. Now, he's only a human being, and he doesn't know, but it's interesting that Suyuti's prediction is actually now, but that does not necessarily mean it, because in 1258 AD, when the Mongols sacked Baghdad, and they had been killing people by the thousands, destroying cities, and Ibn al-Athir, the great writer, he said, I wish I was never born. So I would not have to be the one who wrote this down. What's actually what I'm seeing happening to the Muslims. And they thought that it was the Day of Judgment. They thought that the Mongols were Ya'juj and Ma'juj, Gog and Magog. And we will be looking more at what that is. They thought this is Gog and Magog. Because Gog and Magog is supposed to destroy and eat up everything, right? And the world had never seen a group of people do something like this on the scale that it was being done. But it wasn't. It wasn't. Some of them wrote it down, but it wasn't. Because eventually the Mamluks stood in the path of the Mongols, the Mughal, defeated them, they gave them dawah, and many of them embraced Islam. And some of them became heroes of Islam. We even know the Mughals of India, like Aurangzeb, and Mughals of India. Many of us right here now are Khans. It's in our names. Even in Guyana, we have Khans, right? So it's all over the place, Muslims. So it was not the Day of Judgment. That's the point. Even though it appeared. So nobody can know exactly when it is. Okay? But what we do know, and the Quran in chapter 47, verse 18, it is telling us, فَهَلْ يَنْظُرُونَ إِلَّا السَّاعَةَ أَنْ تَأْتِيَهُمْ بَغْتَةً فَقَدْ جَاءَ أَشْرَاطُهَا. Allah said, do they await anything other than the hour, that it should come upon them suddenly? But some of its signs have already come. Okay, so this here, this is where the Quran is now giving, an understanding. It said, ashrat, the signs have already come. Okay, signs of the Day of Judgment. And so ashrat as-sa'a, and sometimes the word is used alamat as-sa'a. So if you're looking in your books, you can go to Bukhari and Muslim and Tirmidhi, your authentic books, and you can actually look up chapters on the hour. If you have any of these things, just read it, because you'll see a lot of information. There's too much information to bring in the short periods of time that we have, but it is serious. But some people would say, okay, what's the purpose of this? We have to know how to make salat. Right? You got to pay zakat. You got to fast in Ramadan. What's the purpose of this? The scholars have shown us that belief in these signs, it is part of the belief in Allah and His Messenger. So it is part of our faith. So that this is not something extra. All the Muslims should actually have this knowledge. Okay? And the fulfillment of the signs, when you see a sign that is mentioned by the Prophet ﷺ, okay, and you see it fulfilled, that will actually strengthen your faith. And it will affirm the belief in the last day as well. It will strengthen the belief. And the Prophet ﷺ showed his companions how to respond to the signs. And this is partly what we need to know. And some of these signs were given to people in advance. Like, two examples I want to give you. One is Sayyidina Uthman ibn Affan, radiallahu anhu. This is the great Khalifa who married two daughters of the Prophet ﷺ. One had passed away. And he was promised paradise before his death. And he was promised because of a fitna, a calamity, a musibah that would strike him. Okay? And so this is like a projection that the Prophet said about Uthman. And sure enough, during his time, a great calamity, fitna, rose up amongst the Sahaba and the Tabi'een. There were confusion makers that came in, Abdullah ibn Saba. They were causing confusion amongst the Muslims, and it became a great fitna. And Uthman radiallahu anh, he held the ground. No fighting in Medina. He was a very calm, relaxed person. And eventually, wal-iyadu billah, he was assassinated. Right? So he was given advanced warning. Okay? And shukran. He was given an advanced warning about something that would appear in the future. Another example of this, and this is a very interesting one. Ammar ibn Yasir, radiallahu anh, famous Sahabi. And he was a young person when he embraced Islam. And one day the Prophet ﷺ, took him. He was giving, special attention to the youth. And he said to Ammar, you will be one day killed. You're going to be a shaheed. You're going to be a martyr. And you're going to be killed by the wrong, oppressive group of people. Fiyatul Baghya. They will kill you. Okay, so this was a projection. And so during that fitna, when the forces of Ali, who had become the Khalifa after Uthman, and the forces of Muawiyah, who claimed to be the Khalifa and thought that Ali was wrong, he should first find the killers of Uthman, that was his family member. Okay? The two forces were coming together to actually fight each other. This is a fitna. This is a massive fitna. But Ammar was on the side of Ali. So when the battle came, everybody on Muawiyah's side, the Sahabas who had knowledge, they were afraid. They ran away from, they wouldn't go near Ammar, right? Because if somebody took his life, the prediction would come true. That the oppressive side, that you're the oppressors, right? You see, and sure enough, Ammar, radiallahu anhu, rahimahullah, he was killed in this battle. Okay? Which is part of the proof that the scholars show that the position taken by Muawiyah's forces was wrong. They were oppressive at that time. And it also gives you the knowledge of these signs, can also give you Sharia rulings for your life. Now, this is another interesting one, especially for us in the north. And because we are living in the far north, and as we go toward winter, it'll get so dark out that the sun is not going to come back. Okay? And then in the summertime, the sun is out all the time for like a couple months. It never sets. So the people living in the north, they have a problem with Ramadan. Okay, because if you're living in the summer, you're supposed to break your fast when? Sunset. Sun didn't set, man. It's not going to set for the whole month of Ramadan. So you got a problem. That means you're supposed to be fasting, right? No. If you're living in the winter, you're okay, right? You have iftar all the time. Because there's no sunrise, right? You stay in iftar. Now, this is interesting, because in the time of Dajjal, the Antichrist, that we'll look at, inshallah, in the future, the Prophet ﷺ said, when the Antichrist appears, he said that he will live for about 40 days. One day would be like a year, another day would be like a month, another day would be like a week, and the rest of the days would be like your average days. So in the time of Dajjal, he said, estimate the prayer times and work it out. اقتروا له قدرا. So in other words, you estimate. If you're in Dajjal's time, it's total confusion with time, then you estimate the times of your prayers. So you can make a calculation based on the most reasonable times. So I took a fatwa from the Canadian Council of Imams up into Inuvik, because there's a community in the Northwest Territories. And so I went to Inuvik, and the same thing was happening in Iqaluit, with this fatwa that shows that they can use the most reasonable city. In other words, there's no prayer chart for them. So they could use Edmonton, Alberta, on the west. And on the eastern side, they can use Ottawa, Ontario. They'll use that. So they take the prayer chart of Ottawa in Iqaluit, in Nunavut, right? And they'll use that even though it's dark outside. I mean, it was a shock to me when I was in Inuvik, because, you know, it was the afternoon, and Asa, we're going for Maghrib, and the sun's outside. So they said, it's Maghrib time, and I'm saying, okay, so we made Maghrib. After about an hour and a half, it says, it's Isha. But the sun was outside, right? And then after we prayed, we talked, whatever, I went to my room. I looked at my watch. It was about 2 in the morning. The sun was outside. After a couple hours, they knocked on my door around 5:30 or so. They said, come for Fajr. But the sun was out. You see, that's the midnight sun. So this is how the ulama first figured this thing out. It's by the knowledge of what would happen in the time of Dajjal. You see? Some people even say you could use Mecca time, you know, as a reasonable time. But I think what most people say is that take the most reasonable thing you can get.
So Sheikh, in that community, they either use Ottawa or they either use Edmonton, or a different community use Ottawa, a different community uses Edmonton.
Yeah, so I mean, when you're on the western side, you would use Edmonton, because that's the closest reasonable time.
Okay.
I mean, somebody would say if you want to get for the whole country, then use Winnipeg, because Winnipeg is like south central Canada.
So
okay?
those places, it's like 6 months daylight, 6 months night.
Right. But Edmonton, for the Inuvik people and way out on that side, Yellowknife, whatever, they use Edmonton. That's the closest. But way out in the east, it's going to be different. Right? So Ottawa is the time. Now, Hudayfa ibn al-Yaman, radiallahu anh, he narrated that among them, the main fitnas that will come, the trials and tests, there will be 3 fitnas, 3 major disasters that will almost destroy everything. And among them will be some that are like summer breezes. They come in and they go out. It's a fitna, it's a trial, but it comes and then it goes. He said, and the Prophet ﷺ said, some of them will be minor and some of them will be major. I want to show you where these categories come from. So this is your hadith. So some of the signs are going to be minor signs and some of them are going to be major signs. So this is how the scholars divide the signs of the last days. This is your final countdown. Okay, so you're going to have minor signs and you're going to have major signs. And generally, except for some of the big major signs, they're not cut in stone. I mean, it's not, there's some understanding has to be, because there's so much that is out there. Okay? So in dealing with it, so this is your sign, Asharat as-Sa'a, Ayat, Alamat as-Sa'a, right? Minor signs, right? And then there are those fulfilled and gone. So there are some minor signs that have already happened. And they're gone. Okay? Then there are minor signs as well that happened, but they repeat themselves. So it happened in Islamic history, but then you're going to see it come back again. And we know that this is the way history is. In a sense, it's a cycle. Some things happen and they start coming back again. So there's some of the signs, you can categorize them like that. Okay? Then there are those that have not yet happened. Okay? They didn't happen yet. And that's another way if you want to categorize the signs. This is a science, right, to understand this. And it's an area that most of the scholars, the common, regular, average Muslims usually don't have much understanding of this. And even amongst the scholars, there's a tendency not to deal with it so much. It's there, but they don't deal with it. But the situation we're in today is demanding that we know this science more. You need to know what's going on. And especially good for the younger generation, because people get nervous and they say, what's going to happen to us? Are we all going to die tomorrow if the Russians shoot the nuke and then that one shoots back and we're all going to die, we're all going to die? Then we say no, because there's certain signs that have not come. And if these signs have not come yet, then our heart is assured it's not the day of judgment yet. Okay? So this science is very important in order to ease the nervousness that we have in our hearts concerning the last day. Along with the minor signs, we have major signs. Okay? And we'll delineate the different signs there. There are some which are packed with information. So I want to show you some hadith that are packed with information. Now, think about what's going on in the world as we go through this, right? And you can actually reflect upon some of the things that's happening in the world around us. Imam Ahmed narrated that Utbah ibn Ghazwan said, the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam addressed us, he praised and glorified Allah, and then he said, the world is nearly finished. And he continued, and there is nothing left of it but a little, like a little bit of water at the bottom of a vessel which will soon be drunk. Think about that. So you have this jug, there's a little bit of water on the bottom, and it's about to go. That's what the world is. Then the Prophet said, you are moving from this world to a world that has no end. So go to it with the best you can. Okay, this is the intelligent person. You're moving from this limited world, what's at the bottom of the jug, into one that's going to have no end to it. Right? So start preparing, for the end that is coming. And this knowledge was so serious for the companions. It was like a reality. Sometimes we will hear the hadith and whatnot. Of course, he was the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He was right in front of them. So they took it serious. And Abu Zayd Amr ibn al-Akhtab said that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam led Fajr prayer. He then ascended to the mimbar. He addressed us until the time of Dhuhr. So he made Salatul Fajr, and then he got on the mimbar, and he started talking all the way till Dhuhr. Now think about us, right? The Jummah is too long, right? Everybody's looking at their watch, right? So They all the way till Dhuhr. Then he came down, he prayed, Dhuhr, right? And then ascended to the minbar, and he addressed us all the way till Asr. Then he ascended the minbar and addressed us until sunset. Nobody moved. Now, that's a serious situation, right? Nobody moved. Now, the hadith says he told us of what was to come, and the most learned amongst us is the one who had the best memory. A'lamuna ahfaduna. The one who memorized the most, he has the most knowledge of this. This is in Sahih Muslim. So think about where they were. He was giving them all kinds of signs. And they're trying to hold on to it as much as they possibly could. Right? And there's some serious information. Okay? Now, another important way to look at things that the Prophet ﷺ has been reported to have said, he said, hasten to do good deeds before tribulations come like patches of a dark night. A man will be a believer in the morning and will be a disbeliever in the evening. He will be a believer in the evening and a disbeliever by the morning, and one of you will sell his religion for some trifling worldly gain. Right? يَبِيُ دِينَهُ بِعَرَضٍ مِنَ الدُّنْيَا. Okay, another hadith. Now look at this now. Think about Ukraine war. Think about the Middle East. Think about Asia. Think about all the different things, the fighting that's going on, especially today. The Prophet ﷺ said, by the one in whose hand is my soul, there will come a time when the killer will not know why he is killed. The killer will not know why he killed, and his victim will not know why he was killed. This is heavy. They're fighting each other, and he's killing this person. He doesn't even know why. Some of them say, well, it's because the president said, or the UN this, or you know what. They don't really know why. They're just following orders. And the poor person who's killed, they don't even know why. Why are you killing me? This is one of the signs of the last days. Now, that's one that's recurring, right? Mm-hmm. Think of your categories, right? It happened, but in our time, it's probably worse than ever. Because you can literally sit there, on like a computer type of thing, and you send out a drone, and you shoot these people down, right? And then go back, and order some burger and fries. Right? Why did these people die? They don't know. Anas narrated that the Messenger of Allah ﷺ said, among the signs of the hour are that knowledge will be taken away. Okay, in another hadith it said, the knowledge will be taken away by the death of great scholars. There are ulama, there are some who are genuine scholars, and there are others who are teachers. So in another hadith it said, a lot of them are going to die. And in the past 2 decades, a lot of scholars have died. We just lost Sheikh Yusuf Qaradawi, rahimahullah. Big scholars are gone, right? And that knowledge is not going to come back that they had. Okay? The second point, ignorance will be widespread. Okay? And you can see the ignorance of the world that we're living in today. Think of the minds that are happening. I mean, this TikTok thing that they have, and some of these things that they do online and get 1 million hits, views, drinking water or just scratching his head or like doing anything, right? And they got 1 million views, right? And they're spending hours looking at this. Zina, meaning adultery and fornication, and wine drinking will be widespread. Look at the world today. Okay? It's not like before. And the projection that is coming through the media, it's unbelievable. And this is part of the reason why this is happening. And in our generations, I can say, after having lived in a number of decades, that how things have changed. When I was young, we used to watch this movie program in America called I Love Lucy. right? Some of the old people know, the old man, I Love Lucy. I Love Lucy, according to the rules of Hollywood, Lucy and her husband could not lay in the same bed together on the program. So you never see a scene with Lucy and her husband in bed. Never. It's not allowed to show that.
Same with the Dick Van Dyke Show.
And Dick, all these programs. Now look at what's happening in the regular movies. It's like what we would call before XXXXX. Children are watching these things. And they even watch it sometimes in the form of cartoons. They're actually being bombarded with this.
You see men in the same bed.
Right. You see all kinds of strange things that are going on. The hadith then continues, and it says, men will be few and women will be many. To the extent that 50 women, there will be, for 50 women, there will only be one responsible man to look after them. Okay? 50 to 1. Now, many would say, obviously this didn't happen, right? But you see the word here? It says qayyim. It didn't say rajul. It said for 50 women there would be qayyimun wahid. A qayyim is, the Quran is saying, al-rijal qawwamuna ala nisa. That men have authority, they're responsible, they pay from their wealth. They take care of their family. That's the qayyim, right? So if you're just a man, that doesn't mean you're a responsible man. You see it? See the difference between a man? There's a lot of men running around there. They're masculine, but they're irresponsible. So this is saying there's going to come a time when for 50 women, there's only going to be one responsible man. And we have all kinds of confusion going on with men anyway, as to who they really are. Everything's going crazy, right? But this one we can still say, in this hadith, it's got sort of like a combination of things. Because we can't honestly say that this has come about yet. Maybe in some countries it's reached that point of irresponsibility, right? But this is how you start to break. When you go to your hadith books, go to your Bukhari and Muslim, look at the signs of the hour, right? Go through it and read some of these. You're going to see some interesting things, man, what's going on outside. Now, this one here is also extremely interesting. Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu narrated that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, the hour will not come until two large groups fight one another, and a great number of people will be killed, and their claim will be the same. Now, the scholars say that this was fulfilled in the fitna that happened in the forces of Ali and Muawiyah. Because both sides said they're Muslim, right? So from way back then, the scholars say this one is fulfilled. So their claim will be one. Then it said, and until 30 liar prophets will raise their heads, all of whom claim to be the messenger of Allah. Right? That's the next one. 30 liar prophets. Now, we have done some studies about this to count. It's hard to say, the actual 30 have come yet, right? But this 30 liar prophets are supposed to come. This is a person now who is claiming he is a messenger of Allah. Like we know Ghulam Ahmed of India, right? We know Elijah Muhammad of Nation of Islam of America, right? Of course, Musaylima, if you go back to the Prophet's time, you remember Musaylima and Abu Aswad al-Ansi, so there was Sajjah. There were a number that happened then, but throughout history. But this is saying there's going to be 30 that come before the Day of Judgment. Okay? Then it said, until knowledge is taken away. Earthquakes become frequent. Time passes quickly. Now that one we can bear witness to. Look how fast time is going. You just turn around and it seems like a Jumu'ah has gone to. Tribulation, meaning fitna, becomes prevalent, and killing becomes widespread. Okay? Until wealth becomes widespread among you, and will increase so much that a wealthy man will be concerned as to who will accept his charity. And the one to whom it is offered will say, I do not need it. Now, this, you can say it may not have been, some say that during the Abbasid period, the time of Harun al-Rashid, at certain points, and this doesn't mean everywhere in the world, but within his area, there was so much being given out to the people. They even say in the time of Umar ibn Abdul Aziz, he was Umayyad. They say he's like the fifth rightly guided caliph. So much zakat was being given out that people didn't even need it. But Allah knows best whether this has actually come about. Okay? And it said, until people will compete in building tall structures. Okay? That's the world we're living in today. Look at the competition. Until a man will pass by a grave and will say, were that I were in his place. That's serious, man. And in some of the wars and destructions going on, life has become hell. War is hell. And those who are living through it, this is recurring. So this part of the hadith is, it is recurring. Okay? And then it says, until the sun rises from the west. Okay, sun rising from the west. There are some scientists that are even saying the earth is actually changing on its axis. There's slight changes that are happening on the axis, but that hasn't happened yet. Okay? And when it rises and the people see it, they will all believe. But that will be the time when belief will not avail them anything if they did not believe before or their faith did not earn them anything good. Okay, so this hadith is packed with information. You can unpack this and try to see where these hadiths say. Another interesting one, we're looking at minor signs. Anas narrated that the Prophet ﷺ said, among the signs of the hour will be obscenity, swearing, right? And obscene actions. Okay, look at how the people swear now. Some of the things in the language of our children today that they say, I would never have said this when I was young. Right? But it's in regular language now. And I'm not going to go through some of the words that they're using. But they'll use it in their regular language. And obscene actions. Okay? And the severing of family ties. Families, people don't care about their family anymore. So they'll cut ties with their family. That's becoming more and more prevalent amongst us. And that is a shock for us, for people living in the West. Our society has been broken up for a long time. But many Muslims coming from the Muslim world, where families were tight, right? And then coming here, and a new generation coming up, and even family members fighting each other over materials. Almost everybody can see how families are breaking down. Okay, it's a sign of the last days. The trustworthy will be accused of dishonesty. Okay, and the dishonest trusted. Okay, look at the world today. Go on the television. Who's the leaders that are leading us? And the people who are trustworthy look at you like you're a fool. Okay, so this is packed. There's another one that's packed. Okay? Anas reported that the Prophet ﷺ said, among the signs of the hour will be that the people will try to outdo one another in building masjids. Now, of course, this one is very interesting. This picture I took in Abu Dhabi. You know the big masjid in Abu Dhabi, right? I think that one is probably one of the most beautiful places, that I've ever been in physically to see. Sheikh Zayed Mosque. Right? Have you been there?
No, I've heard.
But that mosque is so. But the problem was, I was with this Egyptian brother, Father Suleiman. So then we were in the masjid, and all this, the Quran is like talking to you and everything, and then, looking at, and then he's looking at me and said, I can't make salat in here, man. I can't make salat. because you're so taken up,
Yeah.
by the beauty of the masjid, the things that they have done, and you look at the colors that are there, and you look at the posts and you see these colors. That's not paint. It's stones, jade and all turquoise and inlaid stones, not paint. Okay? And they are trying to outdo each other. Everybody's trying to do it. Even a country like Algeria. And Algeria, although it has a great history of Muslims, it became very secular in the colonial period when they gained their independence. Their socialist committees came in and they fought off the Muslims. But Algeria right now is building a huge masjid. And they want it to be the biggest, one of the biggest in the world. Even in Algeria. Because Morocco has one too in Morocco. If you go to the King Hassan Mosque in Casablanca, which is a beautiful masjid, right? That one, is one of the biggest in the world. Right. So everybody's trying to get, what's the latest? Everybody wants to get the biggest, masjid, and they're competing with each other to build it. So that's a sign is definitely fulfilled. Okay? Now, this is a descriptive hadith. I would say, and this is where the Prophet, Auf ibn Malik, radiallahu anh, he said, I came to the Prophet ﷺ during the campaign of Tabuk. That is when they were going to fight the Romans. Okay? When he was in a leather tent, and he said, count 6 things before the hour. See how he was giving things to people? He said, count 6 things. 1, he said, my death. That's a big sign of the last day. Next, the conquest of Beit al-Maqdis, Jerusalem. Then widespread death, which will come upon you like murrain in sheep, not COVID-19. Widespread death. That one actually happened in the time of the Sahaba, because during Umar's time there was a terrible plague. And Abu Ubaidah ibn al-Jarrah, radiallahu anh, he actually died during this plague. Then an abundance of wealth, such that even if a man is given 100 dinars, he will remain angry and discontent because you gave him 100 dinars. I mean, I remember that we had a community center on Western Road, and we opened up a food bank. And so people in Toronto were in need of food. And so then now hundreds of people were coming to our food bank. And it was like a United Nations, line right here in Toronto. And one day I came in, and this man was there with his family. And he was saying, well, I heard the Saudis are giving money. So he's in line. He got a nice leather jacket on, right? But he's in line with the food bank. Then one of the families came up, and they were asking for food. And, our workers are trained to interview you. So they see, father, wife, 3 children. And, okay, we have rice. We have the foods that Muslims want, right? So they want chickpeas, they want, ghee, oil, rice, whatever. So we give them a certain amount. So then they gave this family rice, and the man said, no, basmati rice. He said, basmati. Don't give me regular rice. Right? You see what happened, right? Right. So this man here, he's given 100 dinars, and he's angry. That's not enough money. That's one of the signs of the last days. Then a fitna which will not leave any house among the Arabs, but it will enter it. This is deep. This is deep. The Arab world, you could say, starts in the Arabian Peninsula, and it goes up into Iraq and all that area, Syria and all that, and then North Africa, Egypt, of course, North Africa, down into the Sudan, Yemen. This is like, you could say, the Arab world in a sense. Okay? Now, fitna is a trial, a tribulation, a terrible test. He said every house of the Arabs is going to be hit by this. Now, look what happened in our time. You have a thing called the Arab Spring. Remember the Arab Spring? And this is when Arab countries were rising. It started in Tunisia. And then, people are rising up all over the place. Okay? And then massive repression. And then also remember September 11th. September 11th. Anybody who was Arabic speaking was in trouble. So you could say in a sense, because now we're dealing with technology, we're dealing with digital technology. So all the houses have televisions or a cell phone or radio. Everybody's affected by this. Every single house amongst the Arabs. Even the Bedouins out in the desert are watching the TV or something like that. Okay, so you could say that in a sense, this one could have been fulfilled even in our times, more than the other times. Because the other time somebody would say, well, how can you say this? Because there are some people who are living in Andalusia or some Arabs who are living, in other parts. They're not the same. But now it's not this. Now everybody is connected in this digital world. Then it said, a truce between you and Beni Asfar. Asfar meaning yellow or white, meaning the Romans. That's how they used to describe the Romans, as Asfar, right? As white or yellow. Which they will break it and will come to you with 80 banners, under each of which will be 12,000 troops. Okay, what is this? People are looking for these signs. You remember the Gulf War? Mm-hmm. You remember when they were attacking Iraq? Yeah. And the nations were coming, all types of this. I'm a European, I'm an American, I'm this. They were all coming with their soldiers. Canadian troops were there. Everybody's there sending somebody. Okay, the hadith is saying 80 banners, 12,000 troops. Okay? Whether that is it or not, Allah knows best. But you see, this is going to tell you what's going to happen, right? So we're not going to be shocked by the events that are going on in the world around us. This is in Sahih Muslim. Okay? So you can see with this that we have a lot to unpack. And we want to, inshallah, in the coming periods, to look at the different categories of the signs. We want to look at those that have happened. We want to look at those that have happened. They're reoccurring. Those that are present day, some that have not happened yet, minor signs. After this, we want to go into the major signs, because this will now lead us right toward Judgment Day. This is the final countdown. So for us, the final countdown is broken up into the minor signs and into the major signs. It's a science, and we need to understand, these signs for what is going on, because I believe, and Allah knows best, in the next year or 2 years, decade, we're going to see some strange things in this world. If those atomic bombs go off, right, you're going to see, you talk about hurricanes, you talk about floods, earthquakes, they're waiting for the big one in California. They're waiting for the San Andreas Fault to literally go down.
They've been saying that for like 23 years now.
They've been saying it for a long time. I went to school in Portland, Oregon. This is back in the, way back in the 70s, and they were waiting for it. No. They're also waiting for a tidal wave, and it's set to come from the side of Africa and the Cape Verdes. If an earthquake happens, a major tidal wave is going to hit the whole East Coast.
Like a tsunami.
A tsunami. A massive tsunami. They're waiting for this. Now, could you...
From Africa?
Yeah, well, Africa, in a sense, it's this is where the earthquake's going to be. So it's the Atlantic. It's from that side. Now, could you imagine if a tsunami of epic proportions strikes the East Coast? Think about America, what that is, Canada, America, especially America. That's it, man. That's it, the infrastructure. Things are going to be broken down. And things can change overnight, right? So we have to know what's going on. We have to be well aware of what is happening before the Day of Judgment. So we've started to unpack this information. And you may have questions, write them down. We're going to have some time now if anybody has any questions about anything they've heard. We're unpacking a lot of information. but try to follow it up. Try to get books on the last days yourself. There's a number of books translated into English. Ibn Kathir has got a beautiful one on the signs of the last days. So you try to get it, but the floor is open for any questions. And we want to see online, with our brothers and sisters online, if there's anybody who has any questions. So let's look at the chat and see, are there any questions? Floor is open.
You know how you were saying there about people who compete for masjid? But there's also something I've read that it says Bedouins will compete in building tall structures.
Tall structures, yeah.
And that's happened.
That's right, because the Saudis were Bedouins. The Khalijis were Bedouins. If you go back 50 years, 40, 50 years, they were Bedouins. And then they competed. They competed. And now look what they're doing. Look at the size of the towers that they're building. When you fly over Dubai and look down, it's unbelievable. Even the clouds is sticking up out of the clouds and stuff. It's unbelievable. And they were once Bedouins. Lived very simple life. Okay? But that's the competition. Now, any other general questions anybody had? Anything online? Any questions so far? Floor is open for any final questions anybody has. So we have unpacked, and inshallah next week we will look at the signs which have happened. The signs which have happened, and then we'll go on into some of the other major signs. And there's some very interesting information, which is not so well known by the average community, Muslim community, and it should be known by everybody. Because things are happening in front of us, some really strange things are about to happen. And we need to know where we stand as believers. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us from the fitna of the last days and protect us from any evil that might strike our children and our community. I leave you with these thoughts. أقول قولي هذا واستغفر الله لي ولكم وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.